Welcome to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. This show is about Plymouth County real estate. The headline for the month was Mortgage Activity Improving, Sales Fighting to Get Even. This is a June show. We'll be talking about the recordings for May. I have a great guest in the second segment of the show, Matt McDonough, who's our Register of Probate. And then we'll get into a little Plymouth County and Plymouth Colony history. So let's go to the numbers. First image you're going to see is of deeds. Deeds are sales of property. So for the month of May, there were 945 deeds recorded, more than the 688 in April. 966 deeds last May, and down 6% for the first 5 months of 2019. We're going to shift over to an image of all sales in Plymouth County for May by all towns, all 27 communities. Obviously, you can see that Plymouth has been the largest one for several months, Brockton being second in this particular month, Wareham being the third largest number of sales. We're going to then shift over to mortgages. A mortgage is what people take out normally to buy a piece of property, although people also do refinancing when they find the rates are good and they can save themselves some money. So when you see a higher mortgage recording number than the sales, you know that people have refinanced. There were 1,976 mortgages recorded in May, more than the 1,495 in April, up 14% compared to the 1,735 mortgages in May of last year. However, through the first 5 months of the calendar year, we're still down 2%, though we expect that to catch up very soon. Foreclosure issues have been something we've followed since the meltdown of 2008. There were only 9 foreclosure deeds throughout Plymouth County in May, more than the 22 in April, 81% lower than last May. And through the first 5 months of 2019, foreclosure deeds have been 52% lower than last year, which were lower than the year before and lower than the year before. The next image you're going to see is of foreclosure notices. A foreclosure notice is what someone will receive if they're having difficulty paying their mortgage. It usually is a warning sign that you're in trouble. If it's happening to you, make sure to reach out to a federal housing counselor to try to modify your loan. There was a jump up in foreclosure notices in May, up to 99 foreclosure notices, up from the 57 in April, 14% less than last May, but for 5 months we're down 30%. Next image you're going to see is foreclosure deeds and notices by community for the month of May. Typically, Brockton has been the highest number, although Brockton's numbers of foreclosure deeds was very, very low, only 4. However, there were 27 orders of notice. You can see 10 orders of notice in Middleborough and 9 in Wareham, something we follow very closely. We're doing electronic recording of documents in land court. Our next free training room session is on Thursday, July 11th. You can call our office to schedule it. It's a hands-on training session, and we advise anyone that is in the business or genealogists and others to take advantage of that free training session. In the next segment, I have Matt McDonough, who's the Register of Probate for Plymouth County, coming in to discuss probate court and real estate. We'll see you in the next segment. Welcome back to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Registry of Deeds of Plymouth County. In this segment of the show, we always try to do something educational in nature. We've had commercial real estate brokers, we've had appraisers, assessors, many realtors, and I have a great guest today, Matt McDonough, who's the Register of Probate for Plymouth County. Welcome,
John,
Matt.
thanks for having me.
It's always great to see you.
Great to be here.
So why don't you start by giving our viewers a little bit of your history and how you ended up as Plymouth County's Registrar of Probate?
Sure. I've been Register of Probate since January of 2015. I won election in 2014. Born and raised in Plymouth County, grew up in the towns of Scituate and Kingston, went to Silver Lake for high school and Holy Cross and Boston College Law School after that. My wife Suzanne and I, we live in Marshfield. We have 4 great kids who are 17,
very
10,
active children.
very active, 17, 10 8, and 5 now.
Whoa.
So school just got out yesterday. We're trying to figure out what we're doing with the summer. As far as my civic background, I became interested in government and politics, having grown up around it. As you know, my father, Joe McDonough, had been sheriff,
right,
county commissioner, and I got involved in the school committee in 2007 in the town of Marshfield. It was a really great experience. I got to serve a full term there and work on some great projects like building the new high school. And from there, I ran for Board of Selectmen and had 6 years on the Board of Selectmen in the town of Marshfield, which gave me exposure to myriad issues, from filling potholes to helping people with legal issues, to really getting in the very beginning of the battle against the opioid addiction issues. And I also had a private practice after I left the district attorney's office. So in 2014, I was engaged in all those activities and with a busy family life, and I heard that Registrar McCarthy would not be running for re-election. So after talking with my family, we decided that we would give it a shot. I won election, and I won election based on a theme of helping people, using my law degree and my civic experience to help people through the trial courts. As you know, most of the folks coming through the probate and family court, it's not a criminal court, it's a civil court. So many of the folks are having their first experience within the trial courts by walking through our front doors. So a lot of my time in the last 5 years has been focused on our front counter experience, making sure that all of our staff are cross-trained amongst the domestic and probate ends of our work, and really trying to improve outreach in the community, which is why I was very grateful that you invited me here today.
Great. And I saw on Saturday one of our great mutual friends, Arnie Briggs.
Yes.
Who was part of the school committee when you were originally on the school committee.
Yeah, Arnie was on the school committee right before me. He's a mentor of mine from my Boy Scout days as well.
Yeah. And he actually helps me get this, my other show on Marshfield.
Oh, good, yeah, yep.
Yeah. So let's talk a little more about the probate court.
Sure.
And I know that for most people, there are bad parts to it, meaning that a lot of people go through some very contested custody issues with children and divorce and those types of things. And that's probably what most people think about with it. But you also have a very strong role in the title of real estate in many cases.
Sure.
That have passed through estates, as well as many times when a property is sold from an estate, you have to approve the process to go forward.
That's correct.
Under a license to sell.
That's correct.
Talk about how people, when they come to a deadline searching our records at the registry, they can go back and search the books, and many times the references are in the books to go back. Then all of a sudden they run into a probate issue that is not in our records. They have to go across the street, in Plymouth anyways, to search that, how they would be beginning to look at that. And that would also be the same thing for genealogists.
Sure. So typically we see about 3 different categories of folks who come in to look for records, having already been to your office across the street. And just so folks know, we're located right next to your office in Brockton on 52 Oberry Street on the first floor of the Plymouth Courthouse. And we're also located on the second floor at 215 Main Street at the courthouse in Brockton. So when folks come in, we'll see the genealogists or the historians who come in. They'll typically give us a list of the records ahead of time, and we put them aside for them. We also will see title examiners come in, and professionals who've been hired to research a title for a home or real estate that's already in a transaction. But sometimes we'll see people come in who have yet to make an offer on a home, and especially where the market has been, very fast-moving recently. People see something online, they want to know, is there anything on the title?
Multiple offers on property. People
Exactly.
try competitive.
Yeah, and see if there's a cloud on the title in their own before they get involved with an actual offer. So they'll come over, and having been to your office, they'll know that grantor or grantee, that there's a note of a personal representative, or prior to 2012 with the Massachusetts Uniform Probate Code, they were known as an executor or executrix. And that would be researched through our office. When you come into our office, If that record is prior to 2007, you come to the front counter and speak to our staff. And if you have the docket number or the name, we can look up the file for you and provide copies and give you an area where you can review the file in its entirety. If it's after 2007, that's when we started scanning those documents. So you can just go right to the public terminal that's at our front desk, and you don't have to wait in line anymore, which is something that folks have been very happy to do.
Sure.
And we also have photocopiers available to the public in front of and behind the counter to try to expedite the process and get people moving as fast as possible. You spoke about license to sell.
Yeah.
And that's an issue that is one of our fast-moving issues where we pull out all the stops as much as we can. There's nothing more important than somebody's personal, lifelong investment in their real estate. So we do understand the nervousness. I've personally gone through it a couple of times, having bought houses.
Sure.
You find out that something's wrong on a probate, and you found your dream house. You want to get it fixed fast. So we have very talented staff. Ben Harley's amongst them, our judicial case manager. And we work cases as quickly as we can to help somebody get licensed to sell on a probate, even if it's a formal. We try to get things moving as fast as possible. Our first question always is, when is your closing date?
Right.
And then we work back from there and see what information we need to get from the individuals. Many times it's an attorney who's representing somebody at the time.
And the additional step is, it has to be approved by a judge?
Yes, yeah, on the formal. Obviously with the voluntaries, we don't deal with real estate on voluntaries, which are much more easier to deal with. So you have 3 different types of probates: the voluntaries, informals, and formals. You did mention a lot of our other work, if I could touch upon that as well.
Of course.
Sure, so our estates are probably about 40% or less of what we do in total. About 60 are domestic cases, and they involve the umbrella that covers divorces, custody, child support, mods and contempts, modifications and contempts on divorce judgments, which can go up to 23 years. I was having a judge explain this to me once. Well, imagine a young couple who gets separated, they have a child, they could be in the court system for over 2 decades with that same judge. So, as I said before, it's really important that we are able to empathize with people when they're at the front counter, because they're going through very difficult circumstances. On the probate end, when somebody passes away and they have assets and they're not included in a trust or other mechanisms to avoid probate, and they have to be probated, you'll come to our office and we'll go through that process of identifying whether there's a will. If somebody has a will, hopefully they report it and deliver it to the registry, as they're supposed to by law. And we go through testing that will and testing the process to make sure that the assets are handed out appropriately, either according to the intent of the will or according to the intent of Mass General Law. Some of the areas that we cover that are very interesting and that I'm very passionate about cover the guardianship cases. And typically you have 2 different types of guardianships: guardianships of an adult or guardianship of a minor. The minor cases, we've seen an uptick in the number of those cases due to the opioid issues that are going on, not just in our county, but across the country. Mom and dad have had difficulties. They're either struggling with an addiction, and sadly, in many cases, I had one just last week where mom was the only parent and she passed away. Grandma, grandpa, aunts, and uncles are all coming in to become guardians for these minors. So recognizing that that was a very strong need and that most folks coming in don't have money for an attorney, I went to our Attorney of the Day program, which we have one of the best ones in the state, and it before my time, so I'm kind of a caretaker for that program. I'm very proud of it. But we started a new program that spun off of it, a guardianship program. So we have 6 attorneys who are now specialists in guardianships, and they come down to the Plymouth office on the 1st and 3rd Wednesday of the month at 1 o'clock, and you can meet in a private setting in the Attorney of the Day room and get legal advice. We can't give the legal advice over the counter. We can give procedural advice and some guidance about forms, but to get actual legal advice about the facts of your case, we now have attorneys who can do that pro bono twice a month on those Wednesdays of the month. And so far, it has been a very successful program. It's been 2 years, and I estimate we've had about 500 families come through the program in the last 2 years.
So in terms of the real estate sales, if someone is still alive and they haven't done a durable power of attorney, what is a conservator? Is it a conservator process?
We handle the conservator cases as well.
Yeah, so just explain to the public how that would work.
I mean, when those cases come in, my first call us to Ben Harley.
Yeah,
we go
sure,
and sit
of course,
down
of
and,
course.
we figure out whether or not there's an attorney,
Yeah.
and we work the case from beginning to end. Many times it involves us going through the MEPC to actually figure out exactly what we're going to do to help people.
Yeah. So I had a friend anyways, who recently passed away. There were no relatives,
Really?
direct relatives. I
Okay.
guess a far away descendant who is not included in any documents, and his home is sitting there vacant. What would be the best process for somebody like him to do if he's the only one left with any connection to establish some legal rights where he can do something with his property?
I mean, typically, when I see those cases and they come into the office, it's usually when somebody is ended up in the hospital,
Yeah.
or in some sort of care facility,
Yeah.
and then a guardianship process begins
This
from the
person has
hospital.
actually passed away.
I know. Typically, by that point, the attorney has contacted us.
Okay.
Somebody who's an interested
So
party
he should
or
go
a
to
realtor.
They should go to an attorney and get advice.
I would
what
go to
to
an
do.
attorney. I recently had a realtor come to me with a similar circumstance in my own hometown, and we had some challenges because there was nobody else who could be appointed at all.
Right.
And the individual was incapacitated, but was not in a hospital.
Okay.
So those are circumstances where we do the very best we can, but we can't advocate for the individual.
So they would file some kind of a petition.
Yes. A conservatorship is one aspect. If there's nobody to be appointed as a guardian, without public access guardians, which is something we don't have, those are the circumstances that we would look at a conservatorship.
And then because the ownership would be so unclear for his heirs, there would be advertisements and notices?
Notice is
Well,
required.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do the best you can to provide notice and identify heirs.
Right.
Obviously, when somebody's finally appointed as a representative, they're going to have to pay off the mortgage and any debts that are incurred on the property or the estate.
Right. Yeah, we see, I've been involved with a lot of the foreclosure issues in the communities, and we always run into a parcel or two in different communities that has been vacant for so long, and everyone says, oh, it's stuck in probate. And many times there hasn't been anything filed. I mean, nobody in the family has stepped up.
That's true.
Many times there's disputes in the families
Yeah.
as to what to do, and sometimes there's a home on my street
Yeah.
in Brockton that was sitting there for 4 or 5 years.
You know, and wearing my old town hat as a selectman, we had a number of those parcels that we
Right.
dealt with
Right.
because it was property tax that,
Right.
that triggered seizure of the home and activity by the court.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Very sad,
Yeah,
you know?
very
At
sad.
least there's a vehicle to go
There
through.
is,
through
yeah.
the court, yeah.
The difficulty is, like you said, if somebody's passed, they have no heirs, no will,
Or no known heirs.
no known heirs at
Probably
that
always
point.
an heir. yeah.
Somebody, once you advertise, maybe somebody
Right,
will appear.
Right, right, especially if there's
those
assets
are-
involved.
Yeah,
you know?
those are very
Right.
sad cases.
Yeah, right. Great. Let's talk about the future
Sure.
modernization of the courts. I know all across the court system, they've been trying to figure out more and more ways to get things available over the internet. And I know probate court has some circumstances where there's more privacy, for example, than there are in land records.
Sure.
So can you talk a little bit about
Sure.
what you see
With
coming forward in the future?
With respect to the probate cases, it's been a very robust debate amongst the registrars, the administration of the courts about how we can disseminate these records. Obviously, they're competing interests. We want people to have the ease of looking up these records online as quick as easily as possible. And on the probate records, that's an easier argument to be made. They're not quite as personal or sensitive as the domestic records. We are still at a point where we believe, and I agree with my fellow registrars, that the domestic cases we have to be more sensitive about. We're at the very beginning, even though it's been since 2007 that we do scanning, we're at the very beginning of e-filing.
Okay.
And when documents are being e-filed and they're going to be put into the scan queue right away, we need to have mechanisms in place to make sure that information that parties may be putting out initially at the beginning of a divorce case, for example,
Sure.
which could be inflammatory
Two and a half
sometimes.
days, all that stuff.
It can be, right. It'd be very sensitive and have a lot of privacy and safety issues involved. And from my own perspective, I always bring up the fact that the children are involved. And whatever you put forward, I always tell people who are going through a divorce proceeding, think about not just the objectives of your case, but think about what record is going to exist when your kids are older and they're able to look these things up online.
So as of today, what is available over the internet for probate?
Right now, you can go on mass.gov. There's restrictions on the domestic cases,
Yeah.
but you can get access to our records in the courthouse at our public terminals for the probate matters.
Okay.
And they're still working. They're working on a lot of policy issues as to how we're going to go forward
Online.
with our online and
Yeah.
with our domestic cases.
Yeah.
Our biggest challenge, though, is that we've been scanning since 2007, but the scanning processes weren't being done with an eye towards content. They're towards, okay, a filing has come in, it's been docketed, it's a motion, it has attachments, and it's been scanned. So we have to have a process in place before those documents are available to the public to make sure that the most sensitive ones that perhaps you should have to come into the registry to look at in person are not available online through an internet portal.
So one last question. I
Sure.
get the signal we're kind of wrapping up. A lot of people call me in our office about name changes.
Sure.
And clearly, people that have gone through a divorce, many times is contained in the document itself when they're closing out, finalizing the divorce. But if they haven't done that and they want to then go back and change their name, what is it they need to file and how do they do that?
They come into our court, and like you said, we handle change of names under many different circumstances. Most of them are very benign, easy circumstances of a marriage change. And you file the paperwork. We do have publication requirements, and even though that sounds a bit antiquated, you still want to make sure that if there are debts outstanding, and some people would try to change their name to avoid those debts, that you're publicizing it in a way that people who are owed money can
Okay.
be able to retain it.
Good point.
But there are also cases that we're looking at now where we're trying to be very careful about who changes their name and for what purposes.
Okay.
Is it to hide their name because they have a criminal history, or is it simply because they're in a different place in their life and they're ready for their new identity?
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So can you share your contact information with our viewers?
Sure. I'm available at the Plymouth County Probate and Family Court. My direct line at my office is 508-747-8510. If anybody has an issue, that's the line that goes directly to my desk, and I'm happy to help anybody in Plymouth County.
And your two locations again are?
215 Main Street in Brockton and 52 Oberry Street in Plymouth.
So it's the trial court in Brockton
Correct,
and
yeah.
it's the trial court in Plymouth.
Yes.
Great. As always,
John,
Matt, great to see you.
Thank you very much.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Technology is coming fast, isn't it?
It is, and we have to
Yeah.
adjust as best we can.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Registry Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. And I want to thank Matt McDonough, our Register of Probate, for the great job he did in describing the role of the Register of Probate as compared to the Register of Deeds, which sometimes people mix up, and what the role of the probate court is in real estate. It's a very friendly place. He's really working hard to make it customer friendly. And I want to thank him for coming on the show. In this segment of the show, we talk about a couple of our holidays for the month. Flag Day was on the 14th, Father's Day on the 16th, the summer solstice on the 21st. We talk about some of our great Plymouth County and Plymouth Colony history. First image you're going to see is the Monponsett Inn. Monponsett Inn is a great place down in Halifax on the Monponsett Ponds. It was originally 10,000 years ago part of the Wampanoag Canoe Passage. The Wampanoag communities would be on the seashore over on the Atlantic Ocean. In the summer, travel across Plymouth County over into Taunton River and down to Dighton Rock in the winter where they wintered. And it was a very historical passage that they took for 10,000 years. More recently, in 1886, Maurice and Therese Schindler bought a home on that West Monponsett Pond, and they turned it into an inn. It's a great spot that's been in place since then. Visitors used to come and fish and bathe and go swimming in the pond. The inn was destroyed by fire and rebuilt several times. This location in the heart of Plymouth County has always been a great site. It recently has gone through a name change, but if you have a chance to get out to the back deck of the Monponsett Inn and have a drink on the back deck out looking over the pond, it's a great thing to do. James Kilroy also was in Halifax. James Kilroy was a rivet checker at the Four River Shipyard. Many people were taking advantage of other people who did their rivets. So James Kilroy wanted to make sure they got credit for what they did. So he would sign off on the rivets with Kilroy was here. He was a rivet checker. That slogan, Kilroy was here, made it into the hulls of ships which traveled around the world during World War II. Sailors that went over to Europe would take that slogan, paint it in bars throughout Paris and all over Europe. So that slogan, Kilroy was here, became a slogan for what was right with America. There's a lot of more detailed stories about James Kilroy that I can't get into, but it's a great history in part of Plymouth County's legend in many cases. The slogan is well known, and there's a cartoon drawing of Kilroy that remains a popular graffiti throughout the world. The next image you're going to see is of a person who lived in Middleborough. Middleborough is celebrating its 350th anniversary this year, but General Tom Thumb married a woman from Middleborough, Lavinia Bump. Tom Thumb was one of, Lavinia Bump Thumb was one of P.T. Barnum's most well-liked acts, both in his exhibit down in New York City, as well as his traveling circus, even bigger than Jumbo the Elephant. And there's a lot of Tom Thumb memorabilia located in the Middleborough Historical Museum, as well as several dresses of Lavinia Bump. General Tom Thumb died in Middleborough, and Lavinia remarried to an individual, an Italian dwarf, Count Primo Magri, and they had a roadside stand in Middleborough. They're buried together in a cemetery, Grove Cemetery, Mount Groves Cemetery down in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a cemetery owned by P.T. Barnum. Certainly a tremendous memory for Plymouth County, a unique person. And on the top of Tom Thumb's grave is a monument with a likeness of Tom Thumb. And last but not least for our images for this month is a Plymouth Colony record. The Plymouth 400th anniversary is coming on fast like a freight train. There's a lot of great history in those colony records that we have available at the Registry of Deeds. And this one in particular was a decision by the colonial court back in 1669 that established the town of what was called Middlebury, which is now Middleborough, bounded by Taunton on the westerly side and Bridgewater on the northerly side, and 6 miles down to the waiting place. You can see the handwritten, beautiful record in the highlight, as well as the transcription of that on the last Friday of every month, usually the busiest month of the year, or the month rather, for the registry. We have on display one of our colony records, and we'll continue to show those off as we get into the celebration of the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower. I want to thank Lorna Green Baker, Christine Richards from my office. I want to thank Dave Antoine and Ben Alexander at PAC TV for helping me put this show together. We share this with people throughout Plymouth County. This is for most people, being their real estate is their most valuable asset. So we love to share information for everyone. And have a great 4th of July. I'll see you after the 4th of July, and a great beginning of the summer. And I'll definitely see you next month. Thank you.